Chapter 44. Boys to Men, late 1930s. Fence rowing, Kehlharft to zig and zag. He was fence rowing as he ran away. After nearly a decade of dry, hot weather, the winter of 1937 began with too much rain. Low areas and places along rivers saw their fields covered with floodwaters. Arkansas received on average about 3 times the normal amount of rain in January that year. It must have been so disheartening to farmers who wondered why some of the excess couldn't have been spread over the times of drought. From dust to mud, the Midwestern farmer would be knocked down, but not knocked out. Riley had come home to be the sole manager of the farm, and he could plant and do as he pleased without having to kowtow to Billy. American farmers are known for their independent spirits, and the Harnesses were no exception to the rule. I believe it was the farmer and their enduring character that helped to make America great and powerful. The hardships of the 1930s helped to prepare many young men who would go off to war and defeat powerful adversaries. The Great Depression was a form of boot camp for both men and women and their preparedness to meet the great challenges that lay ahead of them. When the fields were wet in winter months, other projects could be done. Fencing was important to control free-ranging livestock from damaging the crops in summer. Along Bear Creek, the stones that were removed from the field were stacked to create a barrier when the creek overflowed and to prevent livestock from entering. All along Bear Creek, the remains of rock fences can still be found today. The natural beauty of the stone symmetry with colorful moss and lichens inspires the observer to stare with delight at how the hard rocks are clothed with soft coverings and invites the viewer with welcome to touch them. Not all fencing was made of stones, but many were made with fence rails. Originally, the choice for splitting rails was the American chestnut. It was rot-resistant and abundant, but a terrible blight came to America in 1904, and by the 1940s, most of the mature trees were gone. It also took its toll on the chinquapin oak, which, like the chestnut, was edible and made excellent food for human and livestock. In time, most rail fences were made from hardwoods like the white or red oak. The rails were usually 10 to 12 feet in length and about 8 inches thick at the butt end. When stacked in a zigzag fashion, the pair spanned a distance of about 16.5 feet, which was in measurement a rod. 160 square rods equal 1 acre. Survey measurements were originally made in rods and have their connection to the rail fence. Clifford Harness was annoyed by a neighbor's hound dog who liked to pee on every vertical surface and sniff about. On an opportune day, Clee and his young siblings captured the hound, and by lifting a stack of rails in a fence, they stationed his head so that the dog could not escape. Clee was not a licensed veterinarian, but he had a sharp pocket knife, and he gave the canine an orchiectomy. His younger brother Roy would tell this story and said the patient never made a sound during the procedure. I don't know what the owner felt when his dog came home with a severe limp, but the story is told that the hound dog didn't ever visit the Harness farm again. The practical use of a rail fence for an animal station was an age-long practice by farmers and shepherds. 2 of the boys, Clifford and Troy, had earned some money from working and thought they needed to upgrade their wardrobe. Nearly all men and young men wore hats in those days. It was a tradition, and the type of hat you wore made a statement about your style and carriage. The young men made a trip west up the mountain to a rural store called Browntown, which was north of Witt's Springs. The house store was an unusual structure made with an octagonal design. I saw the dilapidated structure myself in the early 1970s near Magic Springs. As my father Earl Harness drove by the house, he exclaimed that it looked like the round house he was born at near Welcome Home. I have wondered if the builder of the Brown Town house and the Round Top house were connected in some way. When Clee and Troy, Clifford called Troy Troll, tried on hats at the Browntown Country Store, Troll found a hat he liked, but it was too big for his head. The boys tailored it to fit by folding paper from a magazine and placing it in the brim of the hat. I suppose as Troll's head grew, they removed pages to maintain the fit. Those boys must have felt a bit sophisticated now that they had stylish hats to wear to public gatherings. Not covering your head with a hat in public was considered embarrassing to both men and women. You will note hats being worn in the photos covering the time period of his account. One of the many places that men wore a dress hat in those days was to church. Women also wore dress hats to church meetings, but they did not remove their hats. However, the men took their hats off at any solemn event. Usually there was a hat rack for the men to hang their hats at the back of the schoolhouse, which also doubled for a church service on Sundays. Elsewhere, when prayer was offered, men's hats came off. I can imagine how grown-up Clee and Troll must have felt when they hung their hats alongside Riley's at the schoolhouse. Grave decoration was a big and important event, which was like homecoming for the community. Families gathered to clean off graves and all eat dinner on the ground together. Clee and Troll went to the Chinquapin Cemetery for Decoration Day with hats but barefooted. They saw some girls that they were interested in but didn't have the courage to get acquainted. As they were leaving the graveyard, they stepped out of the road to let a car pass by them. Realizing that the girls in the car were those they had seen earlier, Clee began to twist his feet into the loose sand of the ditch, and Troll did the same. They felt ashamed to be barefooted, but then they looked like they had been planted in the ditch, new hats on top and no feet. Years later, they laughed about those girls passing them by, wondering if those boys were stuck and needed to be pulled out. As Riley's 4 older boys grew up, Earl became close to Perry and Cliff with Troy. When Earl decided he wanted to get a high school education, Riley agreed and helped him find a place where he could live and work in Marshall. In the fall of 1936, William Earl Harness was 17 years old when he enrolled as a freshman at Marshall High School. Riley got his oldest son secured with a job at the Lindsay Hotel, where he did chores for his room and board. Riley took out $2 silver and gave them to Earl for any needs that might arise. Earl was reluctant to take money, knowing that his family needed every dime that his dad could earn. But with insistence from Pop, he carried them in the bib pocket of his coveralls for safekeeping. In time, they wore an imprint in his overalls pocket, making 2 perfect circles. When I asked Dad what he did with the money, he never remembered spending it, only that he carried it for a long time, in case of an unexpected need. For the following 4 years, Earl stayed in Marshall for the school term and then returned to Bear Creek to spend the summer. He loved school and being with young people his age. Playing baseball and learning to sing and dance were a few of the activities that he then had time and opportunity to do. His ambition was to be a town boy and never be a farmer again. Besides his daily chores at the Lindsay Hotel where he stayed, he would shine shoes and do errands for small change. He later got a job at the Baker drugstore as a soda jerk. He served sodas and ice cream from behind the counter. It was a dream job for a boy who had grown up on cornbread and salt pork. But as the saying goes, you can take a boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. He would have a change of heart in the years to come about farming. Reflection. Men often develop a love language for those near them. They may say few words about how they feel emotionally toward family, close friends, or even strangers. However, they show affection by means of giving gifts, protection, or friendship. Few men from this era ever said they loved you, but they showed their endearment in tangible ways. Actions speak louder than words. My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. 1 John 3:18. When Earl was in high school at Marshall, he entered a talent contest with the help of a friend, and they won it with their rendition of a popular song of the time called Foggy Mountain Top. It was recorded by the Carter family in 1929. You can find their original recording on YouTube, Earl Could Yodel, which helped them to win the competition. Carter Family, 1929. Foggy Mountain Top. If I was on some foggy mountain top, I'd sail away to the west. I'd sail around this whole wide world. To the girl I love the best. If I had listened what Mama says, I would not have been here today, a-lying around this old jailhouse, a-weeping my sweet life away. Yeah, o-lay-e-o, lee-o-la-e-a, lee-o-lay-e, lay-e, o-lay-e. Oh, if you see that girl of mine, there's something you must tell her. She need not be fooling no time away to court some other feller. Oh, she's caused me to weep. She's caused me to mourn. She caused me to leave my home for the lonesome pine and the good old times. I'm on my way back home. Yeah, o-lay-e-o, lee-o-la-e-a, lee-o-lay-e, lay-e, o-lay-e. Oh, when you go a-courtin', I'll tell you how to do. Pull off that long-tailed roustabout. Put on your navy blue. Yeah, o-lay-e-o, lee-o-la-e-a, lee-o-lay-e, lay-e, o-lay-e.